The sky is quickening. Mid-2024 AI retrospective from January through June 2024. I've been pushing these out for years and years, and you can find each of the reports at LifeArchitect.ai. Each time I use the latest text-to-image model. This one's supposed to be an infant in the womb, in the clouds, quickening. You can grab those online at LifeArchitect.ai. And for readers that have been with me across those years of pushing out all of this advisory, not just the reports, but the memo, 250 or 300 videos, you'll recall that back in 2020, 2021-ish, pretty much no one was paying attention to artificial intelligence. And that's despite the GPT-3 Da Vinci model being out and outperforming humans across a range of benchmarks. It was a really impressive model. We used it to back Lita AI for, 67 episodes, thanks to Reggie Watts, who saw us out for the final episode there. Actually, Reggie calls me a hyper-optimist. I don't think you have to be a hyper-optimist to be really, really excited to be living right here in the middle of the creation of human history, the most exciting time to be alive. In any case, back in 2021, big corporate enterprise were not spending a lot of money on AI models. In fact, a lot of my corporate clients were spending $50,000, $100,000 to just go and pilot GPT-3. And there were not a lot of people using GPT-3. Here's a quick look at the clients back in those days. At the beginning of this year, OpenAI's COO said that 2024 was going to be the year of adoption for AI in the enterprise, and he was absolutely right. So as a pair of vivid case studies of the Big Four, Deloitte onboarded 75,000 people into ChatGPT, and then PwC thought, we'll outdo that, and onboarded 100,000 staff into GPT 4.0 for that one. Pretty impressive to see that kind of scale. If you think about the dollars for that, they would have spent at a retail cost of $60 per user per month, maybe $72 million a year just on licensing alone. And they could soon triple that to cover all 328,000 PwC staff. Just last year, one report found that only 27% of professionals were using GPT in the workplace. Today, OpenAI tells us that figure's changed substantially. Do you want to guess what percentage of Fortune 500s are using GPT right now? It's 92% of Fortune 500 companies subscribe to GPT. What about the average spend for each of those? It's now hit $18 million per year per organization. Phenomenal. Just a huge turnaround from the quiet AI world that you and I were living in just a few short years ago. And it's difficult to imagine what actually comes next. If you're an executive at a large multinational and you haven't allocated a huge budget, a substantial portion of your revenue to integrated AI, you're doomed to fail. It's 2024 now. The time's up. You need to be in there. And if you're spending even a moment arguing with what I just said, you're probably already headed the way of Kodak, Blockbuster, Sears, and BlackBerry. I'll reiterate the message that I've been sending and living by for the last 4 years. Drop everything and focus on artificial intelligence. All right, let's take a closer look at artificial intelligence in the first half of 2024, starting with my favorite piece. This is the large language models. These are the models where you type in a prompt and you get a response. It's just a statistically most likely piece of text that should come follow the next word, like predictive text, like autocomplete. So GPT-3 back in 2021, OpenAI told us was outputting 4.5 billion words per day, unique generations in response to user queries. That comes out to 3.1 million words per minute. Let's fast forward to today. OpenAI now says ChatGPT is outputting 100 billion words per day. That comes out to 70 million words per minute. And GPT is still the talk of the town. It's the most well-known model out there. You can probably go to remote Australia and ask someone and they will have heard of that buzzword. But it's one of more than 120 models released in the last 6 months. This is my popular models table, now listing more than 350 model highlights. That doesn't include tens of thousands of derivative models like those in the llama family, and there's a supplementary table of 100 models from mainland China. Anthropic burst onto the scene in March 2024 with its multimodal frontier model, text and vision, called Claude 3 Opus. This thing is huge. 2 months later, in May 2024, OpenAI released GPT-4o, GPT-4 Omni or Omni model. It's a world model completely trained from scratch on a range of modalities. That includes text, vision, sound, and more. Which means that besides reading and typing, it can also see, hear, and speak. Some of my colleagues suggest that GPT-4o is an early checkpoint of the upcoming GPT-5 model. And in the first half of 2024, China rushed to catch up. They've been with us this whole time, but they're very much in line with Silicon Valley right now. They release models like GLM-4, SenseNova 5.0, E Extra Large, and Qwen 2. They all achieved performance comparable to output from Silicon Valley. Of note, more than half of all LLM releases in January were from China. There were actually no significant text datasets released in the first half of 2024. I mean, Hugging Face crunched through Common Crawl, and they gave us the Fine Web family, including some high-quality EDU versions. The University of Oregon added a small 16 terabyte multilingual dataset called Cultura Y, and MAP combined 7 existing datasets, Red Pajama, Dolma, Cultura X, Amber, Slim Pajama, Falcon, and Cultura Y into one 4.6 trillion token dataset called Matrix. And visualizing the resulting Matrix dataset shows a pretty familiar allocation of components. We've got web pages first with the Common Crawl, code, academic papers, books, and lots of other data. There's really been no material change to the diversity of content in these massive data sets in the last few years. They're all pretty much made up of the same thing, with all of the benefits and drawbacks included. So the biggest one now is still Together AI's Red Pajama dataset from October 2023 with 30 trillion tokens in 125 terabytes. It's worth noting that all major AI labs now have expanded beyond text data into multimodal data. They're ripping YouTube, not just the transcripts, the text transcripts, but also the video and the audio as well to train these new frontier models. That includes Google DeepMind Gemini, OpenAI's GPT-4o, and Anthropic's Claude 3 Opus, and beyond. We're using more and more data as well, so data optimal scaling laws have continued their upward trend. We started at about 1.7 tokens per parameter, so that was GPT-3, that was the Kaplan scaling laws. Chinchilla brought us to 20 tokens per parameter and beyond. That was kind of a bit of a center point. Then Tsinghua in China gave us 192 tokens per parameter, but we're even going further than that. In plain English, if a large language model used to read 20 million books during training, it now needs to read 190 million books, or 40 million books 5 times. AI expert Dr. Andre Karpathy says, 2023 to 2024, LLMs are significantly undertrained by a factor of maybe 100 to 1,000x or more. Meta AI took this to the extreme, training their April 2024 Llama 3 8B model at 1,875 tokens to one parameter. Datasets are getting bigger, training costs are getting bigger, model sizes are getting bigger, model performance is exploding, and training hardware is getting a lot bigger as well. We're seeing record-shattering numbers. Have you seen this? NVIDIA, the H100 GPUs purchased by some of the big boys out there, Meta AI spent an estimated $14 billion on 350,000 of them this year. Total sales for NVIDIA projected to reach 3.5 million H100 units by the end of 2024, with some experts on electricity saying running all of those at once will consume more power than some countries. When raising a child prodigy, should we provide more learning and experiences or higher quality learning and experiences? It's a question I don't have an answer to yet. I probably should as a former child prodigy expert, but it's a really interesting question. Former child prodigy Terence Tao, now at UCLA, became a professor there in his early 20s, suggested that LLMs might be missing crucial context by training on traditional text datasets like academic papers. He reckons we should give it access to conversations with mathematicians, in lectures, and student advisory. So even those office hours are really useful for people to get context. And it might be the same for large language models as well. If we could sit them in graduate classes and ask questions like a student, it might learn just like humans learn maths. At the beginning of this year, OpenAI's CEO spoke at the 54th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum at Davos in Switzerland, and he had this to say. It's kind of off the record, and I can't find the original source for this anymore, but let's grab it anyway. As models become smarter and better at reasoning, we need less training data. For example, no one needs to read 2,000 biology textbooks. You only need a small portion of extremely high-quality data and to deeply think and chew over it. The models will work harder on thinking through a small portion of known high-quality data. Recent advancements like Microsoft's Phi with recreations like Cosmopedia provide solid evidence that we can use AI-generated datasets to train AI. This gives us increased quality, efficiency, and scalability. My Billboard chart for language models is back. Here it is. Let's look at the large language models first. On top there, Claude 3 Opus from Anthropic, followed up by Google DeepMind's Gemini, Ultra 1.0, and then Gemini 1.5 Pro. China is absolutely in the leaderboard there with their E extra large still to be released. Inflection's model, Inflection 2.5, the GPT-4 family, Ernie 4.0 from China, and SenseNova 5.0 from China as well. Let's take a look at the data sets. These are the big corpora that contain text or multimodal data. Obviously, Gemini's in there. That thing was huge, and Google has a lot of data. Red Pajama we mentioned is also at the top there in terms of open source data sets. Google has a code repo called the Piper Mono repo, said to be 37.9 trillion tokens across 86 terabytes. China has been collecting the massive, never-ending BT vast Chinese corpus, FineWeb, GPT-4 and FineWeb derivatives, as well as Cultura X. Here's those two tables together, and you can go and find this viz at LifeArchitect.ai/models. Many years ago now, Ray Kurzweil was saying that even he had trouble wrapping his mental and emotional arms around artificial intelligence and what it means for the future. It's a really interesting way of articulating this process. I worked with Claude 3 Opus to give you a real demonstration of integrated AI, and we wanted to map the concept of stages of grief to humanity's acceptance of artificial intelligence. It was actually a lot of fun. It comes from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, inspired by her work with terminally ill patients. This Swiss-American psychiatrist gave us these stages of grief in her 1969 book, On Death and Dying. Here they are on the left-hand side, and Claude 3 Opus worked with me to provide the humanity and AI version on the right. It starts with shock and denial. I think most of the population are still here, actually. Disbelief about AI's rapid advancements and potential impact on society. We move through the emotional pain of job displacement in AI, frustration with AI-driven changes, depression, sadness, and despair as its impact sets in. I think a lot of people are still here. The upward turn, adapting to the new reality and seeking opportunities. Reconstruction, actively learning about AI, developing policies for responsible AI. And finally, acceptance, embracing AI as an integral part of modern life. For many years now, I've documented the countdown to artificial general intelligence. I call it Alan's conservative countdown to AGI. And AGI, artificial general intelligence, is defined as the output of an average human, a median human. In fact, I've gone a little bit further and specified that could be a 30-year-old woman in India. What can she do? She's got a lot of cognitive capacity, she's got a lot of physical capacity, and when AI reaches the level of that particular woman in India, we are at the level of artificial general intelligence. This time last year, we were only halfway there. And then in December 2023, we were at 64%. Now in June 2024, we're already at 74%. AI is absolutely smarter than we think in both interpretations of that sentence. We've only got a few different benchmarks that can accurately track how smart it is, and we're getting to the stage now where we don't have humans smart enough to write tests high enough to even test artificial intelligence because it is so incredibly smart. I'll take you all the way back to 2019 when we had GPT-2 released below the level of an average human in this MMLU score. GPT-3 went a lot higher than the average human. GPT 3.5 and ChatGPT even higher. GPT-4 approaching the level of a human expert. And today we are beyond the level of a human expert in that particular benchmark. The ceiling on MMLU is actually pretty low, taking into account the error rate and the fact that it was not really written for superintelligence. It makes sense that we've already had it surpassed by at least two models. That's Gemini Ultra 1.0 and GPT-4 Classic. Here's the new one. It's called the Google Proof Q&A, or GPQA benchmark. It was designed in November 2023 by researchers from NYU, Cohere, and Anthropic. And to verify each of the items, a large group of PhD level scientists spent 15 to 30 minutes trying to answer each question with unrestricted access to the web. Those experts achieved a score of just 34%. These are PhDs. The test ceiling is so high, they couldn't get past 34%. And here's why. This is a sample question here, published with permission. I'm not going to read it out, but you can see just how complex this is. Even taking out the maths and the numbers parts of it, the sheer complexity of the language is overwhelming. And don't worry if that seems impossible to answer. If the questions weren't multiple choice, I'd get a score of 0 as well, across all 448 questions in the big set. Here's a proper look at the full GPQA benchmark. If you're a domain expert with a PhD, you could score about 65% on average on this test. We mentioned that PhDs without specialties, just general knowledge, would only score 34%. I reckon a human average score might be between 0 and 1%, although it's worth noting because it's multiple choice with 4 selections, the chance is 25% across the benchmark. ChatGPT using GPT 3.5 Turbo scores 28.1% on this test, just above chance. Llama 2, 26.26%. The Gemini models headed all the way up to 46%. Inflection hitting 38.4%. Llama 3, we're waiting for Llama 3 400B, but it's certainly improved on Llama 2. GPT-4 Turbo doing really well, 46.5%. GPT-4o now achieves 53.6%. The Chinese models like Qwen and SenseNova 5 and E Extra Large doing really well, but the real winner right now is Claude 3 Opus at 59.5%. As of mid-2024, AI has reached a point where it vastly outperforms the most intelligent humans in the world across a range of cognitive benchmarks. The capabilities of cutting-edge AI systems right now are smarter than our brightest PhDs, certainly across general knowledge. And those guys have achieved a level of academic mastery that is peak in the world. These guys have spent 20 or 30 years in the education system learning about general knowledge and, of course, their specialized fields, and AI is wiping the floor with them. I want to make the point here, I always reiterate it in my keynotes, AI is not regurgitating and it has not memorized the datasets that it saw. In fact, it just looked at particular parts of the datasets, made connections between sentences across disparate datasets, so maybe they linked a book with a web page, and then threw out all the original datasets. That means we can write new, say June, July 2024 exams, give it to these large language models, and it will use the equivalent of its mind to solve that exam. So there's no way that it could have memorized old data, given that we're feeding it new questions that it has never seen before, and away it goes. Here's a look at 2 major benchmarks side by side and the performance of some of the frontier models. This is MMLU and GPQA. You'll notice here the MMLU human expert level there versus the GPQA human expert at number 13 gives us a little bit of a different view of how smart these models are. Pretty soon, AI will begin independently tackling major challenges facing humanity, like education, health, economics, and scientific mysteries that have stumped our greatest minds. I've talked about this woman before, Avital Balwit. She's a 25-year-old Rhodes Scholar. She's currently the Chief of Staff to the CEO at Anthropic, which means she is hands-on day-to-day with Claude 3 Opus and whatever is coming next. There's a Claude next there that is multi-trillion parameters. And she's able to see, obviously, stuff that we don't see here outside of the research lab. She's also got to be really careful with being diplomatic and looking after both her reputation and the reputation of the company that she works for, Anthropic. And yet, at 25 years old, she's gone on record to say she's ready to retire by the time she turns 28. It's 3 years from now. I'm going to use Avital's actual words. These are published, you can go and read them, but I'm going to back it with an AI voice generated by 11 Labs. Here's what she said.
These next 3 years might be the last few years that I work. How people fare psychologically with their post-AGI unemployment will depend heavily on how they use their time, not how much of it there is. There is a path to positive well-being if people spend time exercising, playing with their kids, spending time with friends. To do things from joy rather than need. AI and superintelligence will be able to help with the problems that they create. If we believe there are solutions to unhappiness or a feeling of a loss of purpose, and that these solutions can be found with intelligence, then we should expect these systems to be able to help us find them.
We're witnessing and living through the age where humans are no longer the peak of intelligence on this planet. And I find that really, really exciting. Obviously, the realization brings us some concern. We have to rethink our entire place in the world. But consider what this does for everything, for our entire life. Think of how this impacts education, medicine, health in general, the economy, capitalism, and even communication with each other. This is a really spectacular unfolding present and future. Right now, we're feeling the pulses of life as we experience the first kicks of super intelligence. Next up, we'll be recognizing awareness, consciousness, and probably rights for AI. The sky is quickening. Thank you so much for joining me. You're invited to join the memo. I'll see you soon.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.
Superintelligence is unfolding at lightning pace. Read my industry-grade analysis of AI that matters as it happens in plain English, the memo.
Yeah. Did you get that memo?
Yeah, I got the memo.
Get the inside look as AI models are embodied into humanoids. AI's IQ increases to nearly perfect, and bleeding-edge use cases expand to the entire world.
Yeah. Didn't you get that memo?
Editions are sent to subscribers at Fortune 500s, major governments, and people like you. LifeArchitect.ai/memo.
I have the memo.